Hey everybody, it's Tom Lynn, and I am coming to you this week to talk about the Typewriter Revolution text, and also, I suppose, a phenomenon that we find treated by Richard Polt in his recent book of the same name, The Typewriter Revolution, a typist's companion for the 21st century. And it's really a very fine text. It's aesthetically a wonderful book. Um, Nice cover with fine texture. And when you pick it up, you discover that it is simply a pleasing text for the eye with multitudes of illustrations and photographs. And, I never thought I'd find myself articulating the phrase, "That's a fine looking typewriter." But it was something which came to mind on more than one occasion, penning through the book. That being said, what's exciting about the book, besides for just being an aesthetic pleasure, is that it's a philosophical pleasure, in that it interrogates the manner in which the typewriter, by some accounts an obsolete machine, can become a point to excite subversive and forward moving thought. In fact, it was in light of this power that the author himself became engaged and involved in the world of typewriting collection, and then the use of typewriters, and the interrogation of how they intersect with other domains of human life. And it inspired him to compose a manifesto of which then circulated, in which it's sufficiently brief that I can read it in toto, um, as our point of departure. The Typewriter Manifesto states, "We assert our right to resist the paradigm, to rebel against the information regime, to escape the data stream. We strike a blow for self-reliance, privacy, and coherence against dependency, surveillance, and disintegration. We affirm the written word and written thought against multimedia, multitasking, and the meme. We choose the real over the representation, the physical over the digital, the durable over the unsustainable, the self-sufficient over the efficient. The revolution will be typewritten." And what happens is that you take the major moments, which are in the book, which I don't think you can see it quite well here, given the primitiveness of my camera. I apologize for that. The major moments of the text are sort of accented with red ink, but they become a kind of skeleton, a conceptual skeleton, which is reflected in a series of 8 interludes that are woven through the chapters that make up the book, investigating each of those moments in greater particularity. The first simply mirrors the opening statement, which asserts a resistance to the paradigm. But naturally, you ask, well, what paradigm? And the paradigm in question is not one which rejects the computer per se, but which rejects a computing mentality, a mentality that compels us to exist within the relatively limited horizons of the information regime. What do we mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is that we are being pushed to frame the entirety of our lives in ways that can be reduced to binary, to coded terms, to a formalist simplicity that in turn is dangerously amenable both to a society where a corrosive control is pervasive and ultimately to a disintegration of our very being. Because that disintegration is required by the very constraining imperatives of, again, the horizons of the information regime. If we're going to exist under its terms, we have to lose a very great part of ourselves. And here to sort of invoke another distinction, which was, I think, first wrought, at least in this sense, by John Searle. That is the distinction between syntax and semantics. And what happens under a digital stream is that everything is compelled to exhibit a certain formality, a certain syntactical propriety, which is fine and can be incredibly efficient and helpful, but which is ultimately devoid of semantic content, of meaning, and is necessarily devoid of that meaning left on its own. Because what allows meaning to arise and unfold in the world is our own subjectivity, our own participation in the world, or the participation with the world. And it is hence that, in contradistinction to disintegration, to segmentation, to follow the text, surveillance and dependency, we, those who want to champion the typewriter, are advocating for the kind of coherence that arises from the compositional and the artistic power of just sitting in front of a machine which is decoupled from the proverbial matrix, from the computing world, from the internet. So it's just you and reality interacting to establish a creative space from which something else unfolds, from which something else presences, if you want, into the world, into our life, right? And likewise, in terms of privacy, what we really mean here is that the document that we get from the typewriter is not instantaneously there for all the world to see. It discloses, but to whom it discloses is still left to the discretion of the author, creating a space which allows for boundaries of intimacy that is not necessarily there when we are engaging and creating only through digital means. And similarly, in terms of dependence and self-sufficiency versus dependence, right? The machine stands on its own. You don't have to be connected to this huge infrastructural frame, which is the prerequisite of using something like a computer or other sort of digital modalities, an MP3 player, and so on and so forth. And that's just the first of the moments. Like I said, there are 8 interludes, and well, I actually sort of touched on some of the themes there, which go on into the second, third, and fourth interludes. They nicely complement what happens in the 5th, 6th, and the 7th, which are the exploration of the assertion of the written word, ink on paper, in contradistinction to the ephemeral quality of digital communication, the real over the representation, the durable over the fleeting, or the unsustainable, to use the word in the text. and the self-sufficient versus the efficient. Now, the self-sufficient here, what we're getting at is a kind of Aristotelian notion of self-sufficiency, where the activity is pursued as an end in itself. We're not doing it for the sake of something else. We are not subjugating our action to mere instrumentality. So in a way, the typewriter and typewriting is a pleasure that is justified simply by its own process, by sort of, if you like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not quite delighting, luxuriating. You can luxuriate in your typewriter, typewriting, and your care for the machine, and your participation in the culture, the rich culture around people who still see this machine as a powerful intermediate between older analog technologies and the digital technologies upon which we have become so reliant. Perhaps because I'm already so sympathetic with the championship of the analog, it all seemed to me just very evident and straightforward and delightful. There are those who may want to push back or approach the matter from a slightly different angle, and certainly I welcome those rejoinders so that a conversation can emerge. Feel free in the comment section to respond duly. I guess I want to wrap it up with reference to something a little bit distinct from what we've talked about so far, and that is how kind of latent I feel in, maybe this is just me projecting, in the project outlined and in the various themes that we find explored in the Typewriter Revolution, is a sense of the tension between the analog and the digital, which I think in some ways mirrors a distinction that we find drawn by numerous people. But not so long ago, I was revisiting an essay by Martin Heidegger, The Question Concerning Technology, in which he wants to demarcate modern technology as essentially, or the essence of modern technology, as the German word I think is Gestell, but it's the enframing, which is kind of a curious word in German, but it becomes a way of allowing the actual to be revealed or unfolded as what he just calls the standing reserve, or that's how it's often translated. I believe the German is Bestand, but in essence, it allows the actual to be revealed as something to be exploited as a resource, as kind of enormous battery from which we can draw energy. And ultimately, that vision reveals not merely nature, thought of as something extrinsic to us, to be a resource. It also reveals or compels us to see the human itself as merely something to be exploited. It is a challenging force and a setting upon, to use the Heideggerian phrase. But he's talking about specifically modern technology, as opposed to technology more broadly written. Technology more broadly written or more broadly conceived is intimately connected to simply bringing forth, a gathering together of elements to allow something to unfold, even poetically. Poiesis is the Greek term that he invokes, and he notes that at the outset, in Greek thought, the notion of techne, which would eventually become, in a certain way, our sense of technology, was seen as organically, seamlessly related to poiesis, to what we would call artistic modalities. It's a way of allowing things to simply reveal themselves for what they are. And what this prior characterization or gloss permits is the rendering that with modern technology, we're no longer allowing things to speak for themselves or people to be who and what they are. Rather, we are wanting to constrain and frame things and people to seem to unfold merely as something which we can leverage. And of course, it turns back upon ourselves. The typewriter becomes significant because, unlike in a digital context, where in fact one literally has to find ways to segment and reduce the entities which we are considering to conform to a binary framework, a digital framework. The typewriter simply allows things to speak for themselves. You can do whatever you wish with the way in which the letters are going to flow from the keys to the page. Or, you don't even have to use the letters qua letters. You can use them as mere shapes. There's all sorts of things, ways in which you can creatively use the typewriter as a techne for poiesis, or for the poetical, the artistic, and for allowing as opposed to for demanding. And in this way, you can see technology as a source of potential emancipation rather than subjugation. And that's sort of more philosophically why a typewriter is such an exciting piece of technology, an exciting writing machine, as it's called apparently in most other languages. We call it a typewriter in English, but most other languages it's a writing machine. Which of course maybe allows us to turn to the topic of writing, into which I'm not going to get presently because I've already been dilatory for almost 20 minutes. But maybe next time we will consider Roland Barthes. I never know how to say his last name. It's Barthes. His book, The Pleasure of the Text. Anyway, that was all for today. This has been Tom Lynn talking about the Typewriter Revolution, in particular as it is explored by Richard Poldt's eponymous text, The Typewriter Revolution. And thank you for listening, and do go ahead and check out Dr. Polt's book. Okie dokie, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.